When Sundar Pichai saw Modiji tired, the day had been long and the air around the government building in Delhi carried the weight of endless meetings, negotiations, and heavy decisions. Cameras had flashed all morning, capturing the handshakes, the speeches, the promises. But now, as the sun began to sink behind the crowded skyline, the energy inside those walls shifted. The visitors and officials were leaving one by one, their voices echoing faintly in the marble halls. Sundar Pichai walked quietly through a side corridor, his mind still heavy with the discussions about India's future in technology, digital, inclusion, and how millions of lives could be transformed by simple access to the internet. He had come to Delhi expecting formality and grand ceremony. Yet what struck him most that day was not the speeches or the applause. It was the quiet, exhaustion on the faces of those who carried the responsibility of a nation, and as he turned a corner he froze for a moment. There, seated on a plain wooden bench in a less crowded wing of the building, was Prime Minister Modi ji. No cameras, no aides, no ministers. Just him, alone, slightly hunched forward, with his hands clasped loosely. His eyes were closed, and though he wore the same neat kurta he had worn in public all day, it now looked wrinkled, almost heavy, as if it carried the burden of every decision he had to make. Sundar stood silently, unsure if he should interrupt. He had never seen the Prime Minister this way. In public, Modi ji was fire, sharp words, powerful presence, steady gaze. But here he looked like any other man, worn down by the weight of time, responsibility, and constant expectation. The moment was raw, almost too human, and Sundar felt an ache in his chest. He slowly walked closer, his footsteps soft against the marble floor. The Prime Minister opened his eyes when he sensed someone near. For a split second, surprise flickered across his face, followed by a faint smile that seemed both tired and sincere. "Ah, Sundar," Modi ji said in a low voice, softer than the commanding tone the world was used to. "You are still here. The others have gone." Sundar nodded. "Yes, sir. I was just leaving, but I saw you here. I didn't expect—" He stopped, unsure how to finish the sentence. Modi ji chuckled lightly, though it was more a breath than a laugh. "You didn't expect to see me like this, isn't it?" There was no accusation in his words, only truth. Sundar hesitated, then sat down on the bench beside him, leaving a respectful space between them. "I didn't expect to see you tired. You always look, unshakable." The Prime Minister looked ahead, his gaze unfocused. The world sees what it wants to see. Speeches, confidence, power. But what they don't see are the nights without sleep. The voices of people who beg for help. The faces of children who have nothing to eat. They don't see the weight that comes with every signature on a piece of paper. He sighed deeply, and the sound carried years of unspoken stories. Sundar listened carefully, his heart tightening. He was the CEO of one of the most powerful companies in the world, yet at that moment he felt humbled. Because here was a man who carried more than profit or innovation. He carried the lives of over 1 billion people. "Do you ever wonder," Sundar asked quietly, "how long a man can carry so much?" Modi ji turned his head slightly, studying him. "Every day. But a leader does not have the luxury of breaking down. People need hope, and if I collapse, hope collapses with me. Still, sometimes, in moments like this, I feel my body reminding me that I am only human." The honesty in his words stunned Sundar. There was something almost unsettling about seeing the most powerful man in the country admit his vulnerability. Sundar thought of his own journey, growing up in Chennai, studying by the dim light in a small house, dreaming beyond what anyone believed was possible. He thought of his struggles at Google, the long nights, the doubts, the constant test of whether he was good enough, and he realized, though their paths were different, both men understood the loneliness that came with carrying expectations too great to explain to anyone else. The silence between them grew heavy but not uncomfortable. Sundar wanted to say something that mattered, something that would remind Modi ji of the strength he still had. But before he could, a young aide came rushing from the far end of the corridor. He stopped in his tracks, clearly startled to find both men sitting there. "Prime Minister, your car is waiting," the aide said nervously. Modiji nodded but didn't rise immediately. Instead, he placed a hand on his knee and slowly pushed himself up, every movement showing the tiredness he had tried to hide all day. Sundar instinctively reached out to steady him. The touch was brief, respectful, but in that small moment, it felt like two worlds connecting. Not a CEO and a prime minister, not a businessman and a politician, but two men carrying burdens only they could understand. Before leaving, Modiji turned to Sundar, his expression softer than it had been in any public interaction. "You have built something extraordinary. Technology can change lives, but never forget, Sundar. It is people who carry nations, not machines. We must care for them first." Those words lingered in Sundar's mind long after Modiji disappeared down the hallway. And as he stood there alone, he realized he had just witnessed something no one else would ever see. But what he didn't know then was that this simple moment of human weakness would set off a chain of events that would test his own strength, his choices and his heart, in ways he could never have imagined. And the next time he saw Modiji, the situation would be far more complicated, one that would leave the world in shock. The silent burden grows. The following week, Sundar returned to California, but something inside him had shifted. Usually after meetings with world leaders, his mind would dive straight back into projects, numbers, innovations, and strategies. But this time, he carried with him an image he could not shake. The tired eyes of Modiji, sitting alone on that wooden bench, shoulders slightly bent under a weight no one else could carry. It haunted him on the long flight back in the quiet of his home, even in the middle of presentations at Google. He kept asking himself a question he could not answer. How much can one person bear before he breaks? In Mountain View, he tried to bury himself in work. He met with engineers pushing breakthroughs in artificial intelligence, with designers shaping the next generation of devices, and with leaders from across the globe seeking Google's partnership. Yet in each discussion, whenever someone spoke about scale, efficiency, or profit, his mind flashed back to that soft human sigh he had heard from Modiji. It was as though the Prime Minister's voice followed him across oceans, reminding him that behind every grand project and every powerful decision, there were people whose lives depended on it. A week later, late at night, Sundar was at his desk reading reports when his phone buzzed. The number was from India, and though it was unusual for calls to come at that hour, he answered quickly. It was a senior government official, his tone urgent but measured. "Mr. Pichai, I hope I am not disturbing you at this late hour, but the Prime Minister has asked if you could return to Delhi sooner than expected. There is something he wants to discuss with you privately." Sundar paused. Privately. The word felt heavy. He had already been planning his next trip in a few months, but the request sounded different, urgent, almost secretive. "Of course," Sundar said. "I will make arrangements immediately." 2 days later, he was back in Delhi. The city looked different this time, not just crowded and alive, but tense. Security around the Prime Minister's residence was tighter than usual, and as Sundar was escorted inside, he noticed the worried faces of staff moving quickly through the halls. When he finally entered a small private study, Modiji was there, seated in a simple chair, a cup of tea untouched on the table before him. This time there was no tired smile. The Prime Minister's face was serious, his eyes carrying shadows of concern. "Thank you for coming so quickly, Sundar," he said, motioning for him to sit. Sundar lowered himself into the chair across from him. "Of course, sir, you sounded urgent." Modiji leaned forward slightly, his voice low as if afraid the walls might be listening. "What I am about to share must remain between us. I trust you, not only as the head of a great company, but as a man who understands responsibility." Sundar's heart quickened. "You have my word." Modiji hesitated, then spoke with a weight that seemed to thicken the air in the room. "India stands at a turning point. We are preparing for a project that could change the way millions live. It is ambitious, perhaps too ambitious, and there are powerful people who do not want it to succeed. I have been warned, even threatened. But the truth is, I am tired, Sundar. tired in a way that makes me wonder if I can lead this battle alone." The word struck Sundar harder than he expected. To hear the Prime Minister admit not just fatigue but fear was almost unthinkable. Yet here he was, revealing what he would never show to the world. "What kind of project is this?" Sundar asked carefully. Modi ji looked at him with steady eyes. "It is about bringing real connectivity to the remotest corners of India, not just phones, not just cheap data plans, but a real infrastructure that ensures no child grows up without access to knowledge. No farmer remains uninformed about markets. No woman is left voiceless in her community. But there are industries, both here and abroad, that would lose if we succeed. They want me to slow down, to stop. I cannot. But the weight of it grows heavier by the day." Sundar felt the magnitude of what he was hearing. This was not just a political plan. It was a vision that could transform lives on a scale unimaginable, and the Prime Minister was asking, in his own way, for help. "Sir," Sundar said softly, "I know what it feels like to carry a burden too heavy for one man. I don't claim to know your pain, but I know that even leaders need support. Tell me what you need." For the first time since Sundar entered the room, Modi ji's expression softened. "I need someone who will tell me the truth when others only tell me what I want to hear. I need someone who understands both the power of technology and the heart of people. And I believe that is you, Sundar." Sundar felt a chill run down his spine. This was more than a request. It was a responsibility he had never expected. As the night deepened, the two men spoke for hours, outlining dreams, challenges, and threats that no one else would hear. When Sundar finally left the residence, the streets of Delhi were quiet, but his mind was anything but. He knew now that he had stepped into something far greater than himself, and as he boarded his flight back, he didn't realize that forces already watched closely, forces who would stop at nothing to ensure this vision never saw the light of day. The next time Sundar's phone rang, it would not be from a friend, but from someone who wanted to silence him. Shadows of resistance. When Sundar returned to California, he carried Modi ji's words like an echo in his chest. At Google headquarters, he moved through the usual rhythm of meetings, presentations, and strategy sessions, but his mind was far away. Colleagues noticed he seemed distracted, but no one knew the reason. He couldn't tell them that the Prime Minister of India had confided in him a vision so bold it could alter the destiny of millions. He tried to bury himself in numbers and reports, but late at night, when the office lights dimmed and silence filled the corridors, Sundar would sit alone in his glass-walled office, replaying that conversation. Modi ji's voice, soft but resolute, haunted him. "I cannot lead this battle alone." Days passed, and then came the call that unsettled everything. It was an international number, one he didn't recognize. At first, Sundar thought it might be a routine business inquiry, but when he answered, the voice on the other end was sharp, almost metallic, distorted by some device. "Mr. Pichai," the caller said, "you have been very busy. Too busy in matters that do not concern you." Sundar's breath caught. "Who is this?" "Consider this a warning. Step back from conversations that are not yours. You may run a company, but there are forces larger than companies, larger than leaders. Stay in your world, or you will regret it." The line went dead before Sundar could respond. He sat frozen, staring at the phone, the chill of the words sinking into him. It was not a casual threat. It was deliberate, calculated, meant to intimidate. He thought about ignoring it, pretending it was nothing more than a prank. But something deep inside told him this was real. Someone knew about his meeting with Modi ji. Someone was watching. That night Sundar couldn't sleep. He stared at the ceiling, thoughts racing. If he told Modi ji, would it make the Prime Minister hesitate? Or would it push him harder? Sundar knew Modi ji was already under immense pressure, but hiding this didn't feel right either. By morning, Sundar had made his decision. He boarded a private call with Delhi, his voice steady, though his heart raced. When he recounted the threat, Modi ji listened silently, his eyes narrowing as the story unfolded. "This is what I feared," the Prime Minister said at last. "They are moving faster than I expected. Sundar, you must be careful. They will not come at me directly. They will try to break the ones near me, the ones who stand by me. Sundar swallowed hard. Then we cannot allow them to succeed. If we give in to fear, everything ends before it begins. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then Modi ji leaned forward, his voice low but charged with conviction. You have the heart of a fighter, Sundar, but understand this. When you stand beside me in this, you are not only risking your company, you are risking your family, your peace, everything you hold dear. Are you ready for that? The question pierced deeper than Sundar expected. He thought of his wife, his children, the quiet mornings they shared before his days filled with chaos. He thought of the life he had built far from the noise of politics. Was he ready to put it all on the line? Yet something inside him, something rooted in his childhood, whispered that this was bigger than him. He remembered growing up in Chennai, how his family had lived modestly, how his father had saved for years to buy their first scooter, how every small step forward had been a victory. He thought of the millions of children in India who still sat in classrooms without electricity, who still dreamed in the dark. If technology could give them a light, a chance, how could he turn away? Yes, Sundar said finally. I am ready. Modi ji's expression softened. He placed a hand over his heart, a gesture of respect. Then we stand together. But as the days unfolded, the threats grew bolder. Emails began arriving in Sundar's inbox, strange and untraceable, filled with warnings and veiled dangers. An anonymous envelope appeared at his California home, containing nothing but a single sentence written in bold ink. If you value peace, walk away. It was no longer just whispers in the dark. It was intrusion into his personal life. His wife noticed the tension in him, the way he lingered by the window at night watching the shadows outside. One evening, as the family gathered for dinner, his young son asked innocently, Dad, why are there men outside our house? Sundar froze. He hadn't told his family about the security detail quietly arranged after the threats. The realization that his children were now part of this shadow war made his hands tremble under the table. Later that night, after the children had gone to bed, his wife confronted him. Sundar, what is happening? You've changed. You're distant, restless, and now there are guards outside our home. Tell me the truth. He looked at her, torn between shielding her and being honest. Finally, with a heavy breath, he explained everything. His meetings with Modi ji, the vision for India, the threats that followed. Her eyes widened, fear flickering through them, but she did not shout or panic. Instead, she reached across the table, holding his hand firmly. If this is about giving children a future, then you cannot walk away, she said softly. But promise me you will protect us. Promise me you will not let this fight consume you. Her strength grounded him. And yet, he knew deep inside that the road ahead would not only test his courage but threaten everything he loved. The very next morning, as he prepared for another day, Sundar received a call that chilled him to the bone. It wasn't from Modi ji. It wasn't from an official. It was from someone far closer, someone he never thought would be dragged into this, and what they said would change the course of everything. The call that shook everything. The phone rang just after sunrise, its sharp tone cutting through the quiet of Sundar's California home. He reached for it with half-awake hands, expecting perhaps a colleague from London or Singapore. But when he saw the name flashing on the screen, his breath stalled. It wasn't a colleague. It was his younger brother in Chennai, he answered quickly. Hello? The voice on the other end trembled, hushed but urgent. Anna, something strange happened last night. His brother rarely called so early, and never with such unease. What do you mean? Sundar asked, heart racing. His brother inhaled deeply, as though steadying himself. Men came to the house. They didn't break in, but they stood outside for hours. When I finally stepped out, one of them handed me a folded note. They didn't speak a word. They just walked away. Sundar gripped the phone tighter. What did the note say? There was a pause, and then his brother read aloud, his voice shaking. Tell your brother to choose wisely. His family is not the only one in danger. Sundar felt the world tilt beneath him. It was no longer just his wife and children being watched. Now his extended family, his roots in India, had been dragged into the storm. He pressed a hand to his forehead, trying to calm the rush of dread. "Listen to me," he said firmly. "Do not go anywhere alone. Stay inside at night. I will make arrangements for your safety. Just trust me." His brother's voice cracked. "Anna, what have you gotten involved in?" Sundar closed his eyes. "Something that matters. I can't explain everything now, but you must believe me. It is worth it. I won't let anything happen to you." After ending the call, Sundar sat in silence, his mind heavy. He had always believed threats were shadows, loud but distant. Now they had a face, standing outside his childhood home. The line between his work and his family had vanished. Later that day, he reached Modi ji through a secure line. The Prime Minister listened carefully, his face grave on the video screen. "They are trying to break your spirit, Sundar," Modi ji said. "This is how they operate. Through fear, through family. They know you are a man of heart, not just mind. They strike where it hurts most." Sundar leaned closer, his voice low but resolute. "Then we must not allow them to win. If they think fear will stop us, they don't understand us." Modi ji gave a faint, tired smile. "Your words remind me of why I chose to share this with you. But Sundar, be careful. Once they realize fear doesn't work, they will try something worse." Over the next weeks, the pressure only grew. At Google, quiet whispers began spreading among board members about political distractions. Anonymous reports surfaced online, accusing Sundar of favoring India in secret deals. Journalists began circling, asking sharp questions. Sundar realized this wasn't random, it was coordinated. Someone was trying to tarnish his reputation, to weaken his influence before he could lend it to Modi ji's cause. One night, while reviewing emails, he received another message from the same untraceable source as before. This time, the tone was colder. "You are meddling in affairs that will destroy you. Technology cannot save you. Even leaders fall when they forget their place." Sundar read it 3 times, each word cutting deeper. He forwarded the message to the small security team assigned to monitor such threats, but he knew no firewall could stop determination fueled by greed and power. Yet amid the darkness, there were small sparks of light. One evening, Sundar spoke with his daughter, who was working on a school project about equality. She told him proudly, "Papa, I want to make something that helps kids who don't have books. Maybe an app where we can all share stories for free." Her innocence touched him. Here was the very essence of why he was doing this, why Modi ji's vision mattered. Not just for policy, not just for politics, but for real children with dreams too fragile to survive without opportunity. The next morning, as if fate had timed it perfectly, he received an encrypted file directly from one of Modi ji's aides. Inside were detailed blueprints of the project they had discussed, the full plan to bring connectivity to every corner of India. Towers in remote villages, solar-powered stations for schools, portable servers for rural hospitals. It was ambitious, almost impossible, but breathtaking. Sundar knew immediately that if it worked, the world would never be the same. But tucked within the file was also something else, a list of corporations and political figures who opposed it. Some were foreign giants afraid of losing control of markets. Others were local elites who thrived on keeping communities disconnected. As Sundar scrolled through the names, a chill spread through him. These weren't faceless enemies. They were powerful, wealthy, and willing to crush anyone who stood in their way. That night he sat alone in his study, staring at the glowing screen. He realized Modi ji hadn't just asked for advice. He had entrusted him with the heart of the vision, the roadmap, and the risk. And as Sundar leaned back, the weight pressing down on him, he heard a faint sound at the edge of his property, footsteps. Cautious, deliberate. He froze, listening. The guards stationed outside moved suddenly, their radios crackling. Within seconds, a sharp knock echoed at his door. When Sundar opened it, One of the guards stood tense, holding a small envelope. "Sir, this was just left at the gate. No one saw who placed it." With trembling hands, Sundar tore it open. Inside was a single photograph, grainy, taken in the shadows. It showed his children walking home from school. Beneath the photo, in red ink, were 3 words. "Time is running." Sundar felt the ground shift under his feet. This was no longer just a vision, no longer just politics. This was war. And he knew the next move would change everything. Not only for him, not only for Modi ji, but for the future of millions. The breaking points. Sundar sat alone in his study long after midnight, the photographs still in his hands. His children's faces stared back at him, innocent and unknowing, captured by someone who had no right to be near them. The 3 words written in red ink, "Time is running," burned into his mind. It wasn't just a warning. It was a countdown. He leaned back in his chair, pressing his palms into his eyes. Every part of him wanted to scream, but he forced himself to breathe, slow and steady. He had been tested before, in boardrooms, in crises, in negotiations worth billions. But nothing compared to this. This was no longer about numbers or reputations. It was about lives, about his family, about an entire nation waiting for a chance they might never get if he faltered. The next morning, he didn't tell his wife about the photo. He couldn't bear to see fear in her eyes. Instead, he quietly doubled the security around their home, adding layers of protection while pretending life was normal. He kissed his children goodbye as they left for school, his smile steady though his heart ached. Later that day, he called Modi ji on a secure line. The Prime Minister appeared on the screen, his face as stern as ever but with lines of fatigue etched deeper than before. Sundar held up the photo so Modi ji could see it. The Prime Minister's jaw tightened. "They have crossed a line. I warned you this would happen." Sundar's voice was steady. "Then we have to move faster. If we wait, they'll only grow bolder." Modi ji leaned closer, his voice sharp with urgency. "Understand, Sundar. These are not just businessmen. They are backed by forces with resources beyond imagination. They will not hesitate to destroy anyone in their way. This fight is no longer about technology alone. It is about survival." Sundar nodded slowly. Then survival must come with courage. Over the next weeks, the pace quickened. Sundar worked closely with Modi ji's aides, drafting proposals and strategies that could withstand political resistance and economic sabotage. They planned in secrecy, speaking only through encrypted channels, meeting occasionally in hidden locations whenever Sundar flew back to India. Each meeting was tense, each plan shadowed by the knowledge that someone was always watching. But Sundar began to notice something strange. Among Modi ji's inner circle, not everyone looked as loyal as they claimed. During one late-night discussion at the residence, an aide interrupted the meeting with a file that was supposedly urgent. Yet when Sundar glanced at the papers, he noticed they contained nothing but general information, data that could have been shared weeks earlier. He saw the flicker of something in the aide's eyes, something cautious, something secretive. That night, as he walked through the residence's corridors, Sundar whispered to Modi ji, "There's a leak. Someone close to you is feeding them information." Modi ji stopped in his tracks, his eyes narrowing. "I have suspected the same, but to confirm it will take care. Betrayal often hides behind the face of loyalty." The revelation unsettled Sundar more than any threat letter could. Enemies outside were dangerous, but enemies inside could bring everything crashing down before it even began. One evening, as Sundar prepared to fly back to California, he was approached quietly by a man in a simple white shirt, no official badge, no introduction. He slipped a small note into Sundar's hand before vanishing into the crowd. Back in his hotel room, Sundar opened it. The handwriting was hurried, uneven. "They know your next move. Someone in the residence is not who you think. Trust no one." His pulse quickened. It confirmed what he already feared, but now it was undeniable. Someone was playing both sides. When Sundar returned home, the strain began to show. He tried to keep his professional life at Google separate, but board members whispered louder. Investors demanded explanations for his frequent travels, and headlines speculated about secret political ties. At home, his wife grew more worried, pressing him for answers he could not always give. One night, after tucking the children into bed, she confronted him again in the quiet of their living room. "Sundar, this is tearing you apart. You are not the same man I married. You hardly sleep, you hardly laugh. Even when you are here, your mind is somewhere else. I know you want to help, but at what cost?" Her words pierced him. He wanted to promise her peace, to walk away from it all. But then he thought of the faces he had seen in India, the children in remote villages, the farmers waiting under the sun for market news, the young girls eager to learn but trapped by silence. He thought of Modi ji, weary but resolute, standing, alone against forces determined to keep millions in the dark. "If I walk away now," Sundar said softly, "I will never forgive myself. This is bigger than us, bigger than our fears. I cannot abandon it." She stared at him for a long time, her eyes shining with both love and fear. Finally, she whispered, "Then promise me you will come back. Promise me no matter what happens, you will return to us." He held her hand tightly. "I promise." But deep inside, Sundar knew promises were fragile things in a world like this. Days later, while traveling back to India for another secret meeting, Sundar's car was stopped suddenly on a quiet road near Delhi. Black vehicles blocked the way, and men stepped out, faces hidden, movements sharp. His guards moved into position, tense and ready, but before anyone could act, one of the masked men approached Sundar's window and pressed something against the glass. A phone. The screen, lit up with a live video feed. Sundar's heart stopped when he saw what it showed. It wasn't a threat letter this time. It wasn't his brother's home. It wasn't even his office. It was Modi ji himself, caught in a hidden recording, surrounded by shadows. His expression, grave as unfamiliar voices, demanded he abandon the project. Sundar's blood ran cold. The enemy wasn't just threatening anymore. They had reached the Prime Minister. The storm and the light, the video replayed in Sundar's mind again and again. Modi ji, seated in a dimly lit room, voices pressing in from the shadows. "Stop this project or everything you built will fall." The footage was grainy but real enough to send a shiver down his spine. If they had managed to get close enough to secretly record the Prime Minister, then no one was safe. As the black vehicles pulled away and the masked men vanished into the night, Sundar sat in silence, his guards restless around him. He realized that the warning was deliberate, not only to frighten him but to prove their reach. They wanted him to know they could touch the highest office, bend even the strongest wills. But Sundar also understood something else. This was their mistake. By showing their hand, they had revealed desperation. They wanted to crush the vision because they knew how powerful it could become. The following morning, Sundar arrived at Modi ji's residence under the strictest security. The Prime Minister was waiting, his face lined with exhaustion but his eyes burning with fire. "You saw it," Modi ji said before Sundar could speak. "Yes," Sundar replied. "They wanted me to see. They wanted me to lose faith in you." Modi ji leaned forward. "And did you?" Sundar's answer was immediate. "No. It only made me believe more." The Prime Minister gave a faint smile, one that carried both gratitude and sorrow. "Then you understand the choice before us. If we go forward, there will be no turning back. They will unleash everything, money, influence, even violence. But if we retreat, millions will remain trapped in silence." Sundar thought of his children, his wife, his brother back in Chennai. He thought of the quiet threats, the shadows outside his home, the photograph that still sat in his drawer, and then he thought of the girl who dreamed of books, the farmer waiting for news, the child staring at a dark classroom. "We go forward," he said firmly, "whatever it takes." That night, in the deepest hours when most of the city slept, a secret meeting was held in a quiet government compound. Only a handful of trusted aides, engineers, and strategists were present. Sundar and Modi ji sat together, side by side, as they finalized the plan. The project would be launched publicly. In a matter of weeks, unveiled not as a whisper but as a thunderclap. Too loud, too visible, too powerful to silence once it began. Sundar's role was critical. Google would provide technology, but more importantly, he would lend his voice, his credibility, his presence, as proof that this was bigger than politics. But the enemies did not wait quietly. On the morning of the IG announcement, the newspapers carried stories smearing both men. Headlines screamed of corruption, false deals, betrayal of trust. Online platforms filled with coordinated attacks, painting them as reckless dreamers leading the nation to ruin. As the storm of lies raged, Modi ji walked onto the stage in Delhi, the world's eyes upon him. Sundar stood nearby, his heart pounding. The Prime Minister looked out at the sea of faces, the cameras, the global audience waiting. For a moment he looked weary, as though the weight of it all might finally crush him. Then he spoke. His words were simple, his voice steady. For too long our villages have been silent. For too long our children have waited in the dark. Today we say no more. Today we bring light, knowledge, and opportunity to every corner of this nation. The hall erupted in applause. Sundar stepped forward, his own voice joining the vision. He spoke not as a CEO, not as a businessman, but as a son of India who had once studied in dim classrooms, who knew the hunger of curiosity. He spoke of what it meant to dream, and to be given the tools to achieve those dreams. The enemies struck back immediately. Financial markets trembled. Hostile voices filled international channels, and attempts were made to disrupt the rollout with legal battles and technical sabotage. Yet something remarkable happened. Ordinary people began to rise. Villagers offered land for towers. Students volunteered to test devices. Teachers demanded training for new classrooms. Farmers stood in lines to register for updates. It was no longer just Modi ji's project. It had become a people's movement. And in that moment, the threats lost their power. Because you cannot silence a billion voices when they begin to rise together. But the victory did not come without scars. Sundar returned home weeks later, his body weary, his mind heavy. The threats had not disappeared. They had only retreated into shadows. He knew they would wait, watch, perhaps strike again. Yet when he walked into his home, his children ran to him, safe, smiling. His wife embraced him tightly, her eyes filled with tears. "You kept your promise," she whispered. Sundar held her close, realizing the truth. Courage is not the absence of fear, but the choice to move forward despite it. Months later, when he returned once more to Delhi, he found Modi ji not on a grand stage, not in a conference, but sitting quietly under a tree inside the residence gardens. The Prime Minister looked older, his hair grayer, but his face carried a peace Sundar had never seen before. "You look tired," Sundar said softly, remembering the first time he had seen him hunched on that wooden bench. Modi ji smiled faintly. "Yes, but this time it is a good tired, the kind that comes when you know the struggle was worth it." They sat together in silence, two men who had carried burdens too heavy for most to imagine. And for the first time, Sundar felt the weight in his own chest lift. Because he knew that in standing with Modi ji, he had not only helped shape a project, he had witnessed the moment when a dream became unstoppable. And as the evening sun dipped, low painting the sky in shades of gold, Sundar realized something that would stay with him forever. History is not written by those who stay safe. It is written by those who dare to risk everything for the sake of others.